It's of Porton Down. Last week, the Wiltshire Research Centre hit the headlines having announced the development of a vaccine against bubonic plague. It could be vital for protecting British troops in another war against Iraq. It's times like these when we want to put our trust in scientists. But what do we know about the track record of Porton Down?
What we're finding out now is that people outside Porton Down, people in the West Country, that they were also part of Porton's experiment.
How far can we trust the men in white coats? Wednesday, the 1st of February 1961. In the village of Ilchester in Somerset, preparations were underway for a journey, a top-secret journey. They were government scientists. Their cargo was a chemical. They were instructed to handle it very carefully.
They're all togged up, but everyone else isn't.
Rob Evans is a journalist who's researched hundreds of Porton Down experiments. The ex-servicemen who were at the heart of the germ warfare trials are fascinated by his tale of the Land Rover. The scientists were ordered to wear full protective clothing and respirators. Strange then, their mission was to spray the chemical through villages and towns on a 60-mile journey northwards. They set off at 10:45.
They got a simulant, which was a chemical which would act as if it was a germ warfare cloud, but obviously it wouldn't be as lethal as one. They were in effect trying to find out how a germ warfare cloud would float across the British landscape.
The scientists in the Land Rover were from Porton Down near Salisbury, set up in response to the use of mustard gas in the First World War. It's the oldest centre in the world for research into chemical and biological warfare. 40 years ago, and Porton was very much on alert, examining the effects of deadly nerve gases by experimenting on servicemen. The Cold War was at its peak. Russia was ahead in the space race, with Yuri Gagarin the first man to orbit the Earth. East and West were squaring up. The need for secrecy was imperative.
For the Porton scientists, it would have been unthinkable to have described any of these tests in the back in the 50s. That would have been as good as telling the Russians what they were doing.
The Porton scientists made the West Country their outdoor laboratory.
The two mobile laboratories left Porton and travelled to Weymouth.
The local people, although they didn't know it, became their guinea pigs. All the trials had one aim: to discover the effects of a germ warfare attack on Britain. One series of trials filmed here by the Porton scientists was to spray germs from a ship onto the Dorset coast at Lyme Bay.
And the order was given for the sprays to be turned on.
The germ they used here, a form of E. coli, had been cultured from a lavatory seat back at Porton. They conducted massive air trials with another compound, zinc cadmium sulfide, the same chemical being used by the scientists in the Land Rover. By 11:33 on the 1st of February, the Land Rover had reached the village of Wedmore. It must have been a curious sight for the mid-morning shoppers. Meanwhile, at various positions across Somerset and Wiltshire, other scientists from Porton were setting up sampling stations to track the cloud. At 18 minutes past 12, the report of the experiment shows they reached Bishopsworth on the southern edge of Bristol. They then went on through the city centre.
They were spraying out zinc cadmium sulfide in the middle of the day when there were lots of people walking around, and it was being done at lunchtime. And I think that of all the 100 and 200 trials that Porton did with zinc cadmium sulfide, I think this is the one trial that people got the biggest dose.
So did it cause any danger to the public?
We don't actually know how toxic it is. You know, scientists have looked at it and they admit that the data is sparse.
The scientists from Porton Down declined to be interviewed by Inside Out. In a statement, they say an independent scientific report concluded that the zinc cadmium sulfide trials caused no danger to public health.
In the areas where these trials took place, there was no evidence of increased incidence of diseases associated with cadmium toxicity.
If Bristolians have reason to wonder about why they were made guinea pigs, then the servicemen who volunteered for tests inside Porton have even greater concerns. George Waite was 23 and serving with the infantry at Warminster. What he wasn't told was that he was to be tested with sarin, a deadly nerve gas that can kill in seconds.
As soon as you enter the gas chamber, they time you. take your mask off for at least 2 to 2.5 minutes. You couldn't see anything away because your eyes were all running and so forth and so on, and your breathing was tight.
When George Waite went through the gas chamber, the scientists already knew how dangerous their experiments were. Just the year before, a young airman, Ronald Madison, had also volunteered. Liquid sarin was dropped onto his arm through strips of battle dress. Part of the way through the test, Ronald Madison collapsed. 45 minutes later, he was dead. Servicemen who went to Porton after Ronald Madison were not told of his death.
If you're sent to war, fine, that's what you join up for. But to be subject to a gas or a nerve agent, you know, that you weren't told anything about and you're put at risk by your own officers, I think it's a disgraceful national scandal.
Treated shoddy, to be quite honest. Really shoddy. Because nobody was brave enough to ask the questions. I suppose it's their own fault, really.
It was a complaint about Ronald Madison's death that sparked an ongoing Wiltshire police investigation into the experience of about 500 Porton volunteers. Most of them were there in the 50s and 60s. But the startling shock for the older Porton volunteers is the story of 38-year-old Ian Fuchs. He was 19 and a signalman stationed in Germany when he came to Porton in 1983.
Then I was taken to one side and said, well, look, we'd actually like to test nerve agent on you because you've got an excellent lung capacity.
He didn't realise there might be a problem until a television report about the Madison death 16 years later.
It wasn't until I actually saw the news article on BBC West. The first thought I actually went through was the absolute so-and-sos. They lied to me.
Unlike the older veterans, Ian Fuchs was aware of the deadly nature of nerve gas, so was ready to ask questions.
I asked them what were the long-term health implications of my taking part in this experiment. They said, oh, there's no long-term health implications. They've been running these tests for years and there had never been a problem.
They said to you, there has never been a problem?
They said to me, there has never been a problem. If I'd known about Ronald Madison, I would never have agreed to do the test at all.
The proof that Porton was testing servicemen as late as 1983 makes Ian Fuchs's account crucial to the police investigation. If he was knowingly misled about the problems they'd had with sarin, then a charge of assault could be brought. And unlike the earlier cases, the people who tested Ian Fuchs are still likely to be around to answer questions. For now, though, a Porton spokesman said they could not comment on any matters relating to the nerve gas volunteers because of the ongoing police investigation.
These items are already being used by dissident groups. And this is a time when Porton Down needs every ounce of credibility it has got. And at the moment, there is no, to my way of thinking, there is no credibility. How can we trust what they say?
The question of trust between the scientists and the public is vital in a world threatened by terrorism. So could trials like those across the West happen today?
The Ministry of Defence themselves don't rule out the possibility of carrying out the trials again. With the increased threat of terrorism, the possible attack of biological weapons on Britain, there may come a time when Porton Down and the British government would want to carry out more trials again.
More on our website, including the film shot by the Porton scientists.